Good afternoon, everyone. At least afternoon here in the Eastern Corn Belt, the eastern part of the United States. And appreciate everyone joining us for our quarterly Halderman Maximizing Your Profits webinar. We've got a unique experience that we're going to start off with today. I'd like to think we got three really good speakers. But for those of you that are Purdue fans, we're going to start off with an interview with Mason Gillis. Mason is a power forward on the Purdue men's basketball team. Multiple championships over the last 3 years that Mason's been a part of. We'll get to that in just a second. But following Mason, we've got Tyler Bruch from out in Iowa. Tyler's the CEO of Boa Safra Ag, and he is going to talk about how to utilize fertility in land purchases that you maybe made recently as a depreciable asset. And so I think that'll be pretty interesting for a lot of our landowners that maybe acquired a farm in the last 2-3 years. You might be able to benefit from this, or if you're looking at a farm purchase. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with farmland value discussion and basically update you what we've seen this last quarter. We've had 4 auctions this week alone. And so I'm going to provide you some feedback on what we're seeing in the market, and that basically pretty consistent with what we were experiencing from last winter. But we'll get into that and some other observations at the end of our session today. So, as I said, very pleased to have Mason Gillis joining us. Mason is an Indiana native. You know, I hesitate to use that other term that a lot of folks refer to people from the state of Indiana, you know, Hoosiers, because Mason is not a Hoosier, he's a Boilermaker, right? The Purdue men's basketball team won a lot of championships last year. They were the Big Ten regular season champions. They were the Big Ten tournament champions. Mason was a key part of all of that. And so I want to start with congratulations on a fantastic season this last winter. As I have commented to a number of people who pick on March, I made by my observations, your team won every tournament or competition you guys were in except one. And that happened to be the last tournament. And in fact, I've told people you did win in March. That was the Big Ten tournament. And certainly had a tremendous amount of success. So we'll start with, Mason, a little bit of your history. I think you said this morning you're sitting, or at noon today, you're sitting in Newcastle, Indiana, where you're originally from. So maybe give us a little bit of your history and basketball journey that has gotten you to the point now that you're a senior at Purdue.
Yeah, so just want to say hello to everybody. Thank you guys for having me. I'm very glad and blessed to be able to get on here and talk to you guys. To start, really, it was at the YMCA. Oh, I was very young. I've had a basketball in my hands ever since I could remember. I can go back to both of my parents coaching me at the YMCA at a very young age. I don't really remember what age, because it just, whatever age I could go back to remember, that's how old. But they were both very basketball-oriented people growing up. My dad played basketball at Ball State. My mom played basketball growing up, and she ended up running cross country at Ball State. That's how they met. So very sport-oriented family. They put my sister and myself into all of the sports just to kind of let us decide where we wanted to go. At first, for me, it was baseball. And so playing all baseball, basketball, football all the way up until high school, and then baseball all the way up until my junior year. Basketball, slowly over the years, I started falling more in love with it over baseball. And just being able to put work in towards it was what made me fall in love with it. It was a lot easier to get into a basketball gym. And my mom would go rebound for me whenever I would ask her to. You know, at one point it got to where I was going at 6 o'clock in the morning before school. She was there with me. I was shooting after school before practice, and then I would go back later that night and she was there with me. So really, to go back from the start, it's my mom. She's the reason why I'm here, why I'm able to sit on this Zoom with you guys. So I have to give her all of the credit. You know, there's a lot of coaches that have taught me things, but my mom has taught me the most important things. And yeah, you know, that's kind of how I started, from YMCA to creating an AU basketball team with all of our local guys. And traveling all over Indiana, beating up on people that looked down on us because we were smaller and maybe not as good, but we just played harder. And so learning from my mom, she was always smaller. She's 5'4", my dad's 6'8". We learned how to be the underdogs. And so it's kind of at a young age, learning how to do that and learning how to compete whenever the cards are stacked against you. It's helped me all the way up through high school, all the way through my college years, because I've never been the most talented, most, whatever you want to say, I've never been the most. But I've never been outworked, and I will never let somebody outwork me. And that's kind of my motto, the way I live, I guess. And that definitely comes from my mom.
Well, and certainly one of the things I love about Mason Gillis, and I've watched you for the last 3 years, albeit just as a fan, I love the hustle and the fact that you're always willing to do the little things. And as we think about the agricultural business, a lot of times it's the little things that make all the difference in the world. And so you said you learned that work ethic and that effort largely from your mom, right? What does Coach Painter expect from you in that regard?
Yeah, it's perfect the way you brought that question up, because he is the most detail and statistical oriented person that I know. But it's great for our team and our system. He is intelligent enough to know that he doesn't know everything, and so that he surrounds himself with people that balance what you need a coaching staff to be. And so he takes the time to learn who we are, and the work ethic that my mom has taught me has been able to show Coach Paint that I will do whatever it takes. And that's why I earned minutes at a young age in collegiate sports. And that's why other people have earned minutes at young ages, because he just wants you to listen to him and to work hard. Everything else will take care of business. He's very process-based instead of results-based. And so I thrive in that because I'm a worker. That's what I thrive in, day by day, just getting things done. And so a boss basically that understands that and is ran the same way, we kind of like feed off of each other pretty well. We can work together very well. And then he's just done a good job of making Purdue system with people like that. Good-hearted people, blue-collar people, and people that love to work.
And I think that summarizes what I've observed of Coach Painter, and going back on beyond Coach Katie before that. So you mentioned minutes. And obviously, if you're in any career, you want the opportunity to perform. You come to Purdue, and sometimes, I think I looked, Mason, last year you played in 32 games, and about half you started in and half you didn't. What's your mindset going into a game? Is it different if you're starting versus coming off the bench?
Yeah, and so honestly, I try not to look at it any differently. At the end of the game, it's a basketball game. At the end of the day, it's a basketball game. It's not life or death. You just have to be ready whenever it's your time to step on the floor. Whenever I was a freshman, my first year at college, I redshirted. One, because I wasn't ready to play. And then two, I was also coming off of an injury. I had 2 knee surgeries in high school. And so that kind of leaked over into college. I just purely wasn't ready to play college basketball yet. And so I redshirted. But in that year, I learned a lot. I grew a lot. And I knew what I needed to do the next year to be able to get those minutes and to be able to get that starting position. The person in front of me was really good. I respected him. He respects me still to this day. But at the end of the day, I wanted those minutes. And so I knew I was going to do every single thing that I could every single day to fight for those minutes. And I ended up taking his spot. I forget what time of the year it was, but I fought for those minutes. And so fast forward to this year, people bounce back and forth, people get better. And so this year I was the starter. And then towards right before Big Ten season, I got hurt, my back, and it had flared up earlier in the season, but we thought it calmed down. And so there wasn't really any like news about it. It was just kind of a thing that happened, but it didn't affect anything really. And so whenever we were into games and I did get hurt and I had to sit out, I think it was 3 to 4 games. It's just tough to hop back in and right into the starter lineup. One, because Coach Payne, we were playing well, we were winning, and he's going to stick with what's successful. He's a numbers guy. You're not going to break away from what's
Kind of cut out on us, Mason.
to simple things. And can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, cool. So I just had to go back and cheer my teammates on, be respectful, be a great teammate, and just keep fighting for my minutes. And eventually I got it back. I got back into my groove, and the rest of the season was that.
So we transitioned a little bit. You kind of had a game. You know, I think in life, all of us have days that everything goes right. And you had a game where you did set the record in Mackey Arena for the number of 3-pointers made.
Mm-hmm. How
big did the basket seem that night when it seemingly everything Mason Gillis put up went in?
Yeah. It's kind of funny because, like, leading up to the game, you know, or leading up to an interview or anything you have in life, you want to feel good going into it, right? And I wasn't sick or anything. I just didn't feel good going into the game. My legs were heavy. I always have to have my shoes matter. And so, like, I'm a little picky on what shoes I wear game to game. And so I ended up changing my shoes like 3 different times just because it didn't feel right. Nothing was going right that day, from class to whatever it was. That day just wasn't the best day leading up to the game. And so I didn't get to go through my normal routine. But something I did differently in my normal routine was just sit down for like 5 minutes and do nothing. I always listen to music throughout my whole warm up. But this time I just sat there for like 5 minutes, kind of just to get my mind right, settled in. And so we went out to warm ups, and I was still kind of feeling my legs a little heavy. But the game started and my first shot went in, and I felt really good at that point. The ball came off my hand perfectly. I knew it was in before, like right as it released, that type of thing. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, I kind of really settled in at that point. And then really the rest is history. I missed, I think, my second shot or my third shot, and it should have went in. It like rimmed out, and I was like, okay, I'm shooting the ball every single time I get it. And there was honestly a couple times where I could have shot it where I didn't shoot it. But like, I don't ever shoot that many times in a game. And so I was already like kind of out of my comfort zone. Like, I work every single day, don't get me wrong. I have all the confidence in myself, and I have all the confidence in my teammates for us to be able to have games like that. But it just doesn't happen that often. Like, the fact of it, it doesn't. No matter how much we work, those games are kind of like hit and miss. But whenever it does actually happen, and to feel that, it's amazing. And to actually like see my friends and my teammates really happy for me, it's amazing too. So
well, that was the really cool aspect of it, was not only your smile as you were hitting 9 threes.
Absolutely.
And Mason, I played in an era where 3 didn't even exist. So I can't even shoot it from there. Yeah. But to watch your smile, but then to see the celebrations off the bench, that was really cool, because you know that team has great camaraderie when they celebrate for someone else's success. And
absolutely. It just speaks to the culture that Coach Payne has built, and then the past players that have continued to build it.
So the arena was electric because of the 9 threes. But besides Mackey, what's your favorite arena? And could be high school, could be, professional arena. What's your other favorite arena to play in, and why?
Yeah, I'm glad that you included high school, because my hometown field house, it's quoted largest and finest in the world, and I would full-heartedly agree. I would rank the gyms that I've played in my life. Number 1, Mackey. Number 2 would be the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. Number 3 would probably be, I love Michigan State. I don't know if it's the players that they always have there, whether it's Izzo, how it's shaped, or the fans. Just I love playing at Michigan State. It's always a good game, always a great environment. Izzo's a great coach. So all of that together. But Mackey, Barclays, my hometown, Michigan State, and then I really liked Milwaukee Bucks place when we played there against Texas last year in the tournament. It was a cool environment, nice lighting. So those would be my top places. A hard place to play at, I will always have to give credit to IU. They definitely make it tough every year. So, but it's not one of my favorite places to play at by any means.
Well, I can fully respect that answer. So, so you had a big guy announces he's coming back, and for those that are not Purdue fans, Zach Edey, National Player of the Year, is coming back to Purdue for his senior season along with Mason. And my question for you is the team better today in June than it was when you won the Big Ten championship in March? And then for those of us that are basketball fans, why?
My answer to that simply is yes. Whenever you bring back a 7'4" center that was unstoppable this year, he only can get better in this coming year. Along with our freshmen that were very impactful for us, they can only get better. And the reason that they only can get better is because they actually put in the time. A lot of people may have a good season and kind of slack off in the off season and not put in the extra time to watch film, to get stronger, to get their body right, or to get better on the court. And so whenever you see those guys getting in the gym, getting in the extra time, it just makes you feel better and feel good about the upcoming season because we know that we're being prepared, we're in shape, we're on top of things, and we're just continually coming together as a team. Whenever you stack one summer together and then have a phenomenal year, better than anybody expected, probably even better than what our coaches expected, we just have to build our momentum. And I know that we lost at the end of the year, but we have to realize how much success we had throughout the year. And like you said at the beginning of this, we lost one tournament. We might have lost some games, but every single championship opportunity that we had this year, we won from beginning to end, except one we lost. And that's the biggest one, yes. But we play in the best conference, and we won both of those tournaments. We won the league by 3 games. And what anybody says, it is absolutely war every single game. So you do get beat up, and that is no excuse for March Madness, but you do get beat up. And right now is what we're working on, how to be better at the end of the season. Again, yes, we're going to be much better with Zach because he's a dominant force. He's the best player in the country. And we will just continue to be successful with him, learn how to play with him better, and just keep going. The only way up is here.
So I had the opportunity to travel with the team back in January, going up to Minneapolis when you played Minnesota up there. And that afforded me the opportunity to kind of observe you guys in pregame shoot around and just see interactions as players and friends and teammates. And my observation, and I think it was recognized, John Rothstein, right, recognized you as the all glue guy.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Tell, for those of us that don't mean what the all glue guy, what does that mean to you, Mason?
To me, simply, I would say that it's just somebody that can keep the team together, whether that be from me being behind everybody and pushing them forward and keeping them together, or me being in front of everybody, pulling them forward and bringing them along, maybe where a freshman isn't caught up to speed yet, me pulling him along and telling him, like, you got to get this, you need to know this, and just helping him out. And I'm very vocal. I think that might add to it too. Ever since a little kid, I've always been vocal, always been outgoing. At times I might be quiet, but whenever it's time to compete, it really brings it out of me, and my personality comes out. And so I think all my coaches have noticed that and appreciated that. Sometimes they might say a second coach on the court is better than a coach leading the team the entire time. And I try to be that. I just try to be the best for my team because I know that that's what is expected of me. That's how I've been raised. I'm a natural leader. I enjoy being in that position, and so it's fun learning how to take one mind and piecing it with another mind. It's a challenge every year because we have a slightly different team every year. This is probably going to be the most people that we bring back that I've been here in my 5 years. So it'll be a little bit easier, but the glue guy, somebody that can keep together by leading with example. So.
Well, and I was reading that in your bio today, and it is exactly what I saw in Minneapolis, because you were the cheerleader, you were the support, and just in the like I said, shoot around when no one else is in the arena, and that's when you can really observe sometimes who people are. Mm-hmm. So it's as we wrap this up, I think you've made some great points today, whether it's basketball or life. And I know Coach Painter talks about having players become great husbands, great leaders, whether in business, on the court, or wherever it might be, and great fathers, and if that's in the plans for them. So I really think you talk about work ethic, you talk about leadership, you talk about how you bring people together and coach them up or pull them forward. And I think those are things that we can use in any of our lives. So I guess to wrap up, Mason, your guys are going on a foreign trip in August. Then you play the season that you've played now for 3 straight years. Yes, a few different teams at the beginning, but a lot of the same teams in the Big Ten. What's your prediction? What do you think this team can do next year?
Yeah, I would say there's no reason that we shouldn't win again by 3 games or more, and win the Big Ten tournament again and win a national championship. Those are our 4 main goals every single year: is to go undefeated at home, win the Big Ten, win the Big Ten tourney, and win the national championship. Every single year, those are our 4 goals, and I don't see them changing because that's the standard that we set ourselves to. If we're not winning championships, then we're not at our best. So that's how we judge ourselves. But at the end of the day, we know it's a game. It's not life or death. There are things beyond basketball, but that's what we do right now. And so we have to be our best at what we do. So,
well, Mason, yeah, and I think that's a great summary. And I know Coach Painter's always had tremendous goals, and every coach does, right? And every company does. And so really appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for your time and your comments, and we just wish you the best as the basketball team gets ready for this upcoming season.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
Stay healthy, young man.
Will do. Have a great day.
Right. Thank you, Mason.
Bye.
All right, we will now transition. I would very pleased to introduce Tyler Bruch. Tyler's the CEO of Boa Safra Ag, and we got to know these guys, oh gosh, Tyler, a couple of years ago, when you brought up the concept to us that there's a tax strategy when you acquire a farm. And I think, Tyler, you might be helpful if you explain to people, you can go back 2 or 3 years in this, but a tax strategy around the existing fertility on the farm and how you can depreciate that. And I have personally used this on a farm that my brother and I own. And there was a value that you concluded upwards of $800-900 an acre on that property. That's not certainly the top end of the range, but it is something that could benefit. And I want you to talk through some of that and at least present to our landowners and potential landowners on the call how this might work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tyler Bruch, CEO of Boa Safra Ag. Tyler, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Howard. I appreciate that. And thanks for everyone for attending. I'm in central Nebraska, where our wife and I farm here in central Nebraska. And then our family, I grew up in northwest Iowa, where my oldest brother runs the family farm now. And I don't know if you guys are as dry as we are, but central Nebraska looks like the Arizona desert, and it has been. We've had a whopping total of 0.4 of an inch of rain since March here. So we are extremely dry. Everything is irrigated. And everything that does not have water on it, most of it has already been zeroed out from crop insurance because it's dead. So we are, Nebraska's is damn dry from a farming standpoint. But I know you guys didn't have me on here to talk about that. So what we're talking about is Section 180, which is, as Howard alluded to, is a tax strategy, but it's actually a tax law passed by Congress in 1960. And what Congress passed was a law that said when you acquire farmland, the fertility in the soil at the time of acquisition, if measured and quantified, can be used as a deduction off your taxable income. So to put it in context that most of us would think about today is if you buy a farm that's been pattern tiled, or it has a fence on it, or it has irrigation on it, even though you didn't put it there, when you bought the property, that asset came with it. And you're able to take depreciation or deduction against that asset because it's got a lifespan. And now that you own it, you're allowed to take a deduction against it. And so fertility in the soil is viewed the same way. So what we do as a company is we come in through soil testing and we measure what is plant available fertility in the soil. So what we do is typically we measure a 6 3/4 inch sample. And the reason we do that depth is we know there's enough oxygen in that profile of the soil to support microbial life. Microbes break down inorganic fertilizers, excrete enzymes, and plants are able to uptake that enzyme and turn it into plant food. So that's kind of our zone that we're measuring. So we're measuring our macronutrients and our micronutrients, calcium, zinc, boron, manganese, manganese, etc. And we're quantifying how many pounds are in that 6 3/4 inches. And then we have a discount factor because we don't want to take that number to zero. So we typically take it like 80% of it, for example. We're leaving 20% essentially in the soil for future crops. But we take how many pounds are there, and then we use a local, regional, and a national price index that updates monthly. And we put a value on calcium and magnesium and sulfur and boron, et cetera. And it sums up into a value. And it's essentially like doing an appraisal. So we're doing essentially an appraisal, coming up with what that fertility value is in your soil. And the national average today has spiked even since we've done some of your stuff, Howard, which I think was maybe, I have to look back, but roughly today we're around $1,300 an acre.
We did that in 2021, Tyler.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're talking about a lot of appreciation in the cost of fertility since.
So today you're looking at about a $1,300 an acre value for deduction. So let's just say you buy a 100-acre farm, it's $130,000 value you can take as a straight line deduction off your taxable income. And the law allows you to take 100% of that in the year the asset was purchased. So you bought a farm in 23 or 22 and you haven't filed your taxes, for example, or you extended. You can take 100% of that $130,000, 100% of it. So it's kind of like buying a tractor from a farmer standpoint and taking 100% bonus depreciation. And we get questions from folks that say, well, how can you take and deplete, in the eyes of the IRS, 100% of the fertility? And it's kind of like this. You buy a $500,000 tractor, you take bonus depreciation on it. On paper, according to the IRS, the tractor has no value. Now, we all know you're going to run the tractor for the next 10 or 15 years and get a lot of use out of it. So you take that 100% value deduction on your farmland, you can write that all off. There's still value there. You can still grow a crop. You're going to be putting out fertility year over year because you're not going to deplete that number to zero. Most farmers are not going to do that. But nevertheless, the IRS lets you take that value. So what we do as a company is we work with clients. We're actually in 42 states today. We've worked with 42 different states, and we're approaching 1,000 clients that we've done this work for. And we've not had a client to date audited in the last 4 years, not one. And we've done it for groups as big as 40,000 acres in the Delta, and we've done it for our smallest was 7 acres in Wisconsin. And our view is every farmer can benefit from this, take advantage of it, and we definitely want to help anybody that wants to take advantage of something like this. So we go kind of like Johnny Cash, we'll go anywhere, or we've been everywhere, man. Our soil samplers, we do it internally, 99%. We have our own crews that go everywhere and anywhere. We sample 12 months out of the year. You know, we hit a lull now where crops are growing. People don't want us out there. It's hard to get around. We get that. But as soon as combines are out, obviously we're busy until planters are rolling here in the Midwest and then places beyond. We as a company in general charge $40 an acre to do the work. You know, if you take a 1,300 or this is for easy math, you have a $1,500 gross value out there and you're in a 30% tax bracket, it's $500 an acre of direct line to your bottom line. And I tell clients all the time, this is the easiest way you're ever going to make $500 an acre on your farming operation, probably in the history of your farming career. It's very simple. It's allowable to the IRS. We do 100% of the work. We make it turnkey. It's painless, as Howard can attest to. We do all of it. And it's a way to really add $300 to $500 an acre to your farming operation, instead of giving that money to the government, which you're allowed to take this. So you can go back up to 3 years as statute of limitations, so 2020 forward. And how that would work if you bought a property in 2020, for example, and it wasn't soil tested and we did it today, we basically look at what's been grown for a crop, what's been put on fertility. Typically, those are kind of a balance, you know, you're putting out for what you expect to grow. But we do an agronomic mass balance calculation to get a snapshot of what the property would have looked like at the time in 2020. And that's how we go about it, do it. It takes us typically 60 days from the time a client signs up, pending we can soil sample. If they sign up today and we don't get out there till October, it's a different story. But and we have an internal CPA that works in our office, and he's there to work with clients of you folks that perhaps have never heard about it. If I had $1 for every time a CPA told me he had never heard about this, I probably won't have to do my day job anymore, because it's such a new concept, even though it's a 60-year-old law. And if you think about it, when this came out 60 years ago, most CPAs that knew about it then are non-practicing or they're dead today. You know, if they were in their 30s when it came out, they'd be in their 90s today. So there's been this like huge gap where everybody says, how can this be? I've been farming for 40 years and I've never heard about it. There's just kind of a big gap where it just kind of fell in a dead zone. One, tax brackets were a lot lower, fertility values were a lot lower, farmland values were a lot lower. And for a long time, nobody was making any money in farming and they didn't have big tax issues, you know, and the whole world has completely changed now in terms of what that looks like. So, you know, I would leave it with this. There's a massive opportunity for folks that you guys work with, or folks on this call that have purchased assets. You're sitting there on a massive tax deduction that you probably didn't know about until now, or maybe you did. But you know, I would highly recommend you take advantage of it. Someday, if Congress changes the law, this could all go away. I doubtful the way Congress gets anything done that's probably ever going to happen. But yeah, it's a huge advantage, and it's great. It's a great process, or a great a way to lower your tax bill at the end of the year. So
Tyler, one question that we've received is, how does this depreciation impact the basis of the farm? So let's say somebody paid $9,000 an acre for a farm, and they have $1,500 an acre in the fertility depreciation. What does the basis end up being when it's all said and done?
Yeah, so in that scenario 9, if you take away, you know, your 1,000 or 1,500, you're at $7,500 an acre is your basis of the property. This does lower the basis dollar to dollar. So, you know, if you bought a farm for 10 grand and you found $1,000 in fertility and you sold the farm for 11, typically you'd have $1,000 capital gains from 10 to 11. In this case, you'd have 2 from 9 to 11. Now, as we all know, with 1031s, it's really a moot point if you're going to roll it into another property. But if you're going to take and cash it out today, buy it today and cash it out tomorrow, you'd have an extra capital gains on, an extra $1,000 an acre. What a lot of folks look at in that scenario, Howard, is they say, all right, I am going to sell this down the road and I'm probably not going to 1031 it, but if I can sit on that money that I'm saving by not paying taxes for 10 years, the value of that money being in my pocket versus the government's is well worth it, if I have to just pay the extra capital gains down the road. And capital gains tax are a lot lower than ordinary income. So it still is a smart move. But yeah, that's a great question. I forgot to address it. It does lower your asset basis.
So Tyler, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm going to summarize for folks. So they contact you, which we can get your contact information out to everybody. But they contact Boa Safra. They say, I want to have you do this. They're going to pay you $40 an acre. You're going to do the soil sampling. You're going to do the report. You're going to have everything prepared that can go straight to the accountant. That's been my experience. They get the tax deduction. The account should be able to use that information to generate it. They want to keep record of it, obviously, for the basis going forward. And they probably are going to save, as you said, $300 to $500 an acre for a $40 investment, correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yep. When we get done, the client is going to receive a PDF report that has every GSI spot where we pulled the soil samples from. It's all tracked in data. How many pounds of everything we found. Kind of like doing homework when we were in grade school where you had to show your work. We show the price points we used, the values that were, the pounds that were there. Everything is in that report as supporting documentation. In addition, that data, the soil sampling data, if the farmer or the grower wants to use that to build his prescriptions off of, or any of that, all that data comes back from a soil sampling standpoint. We work with, we have a young lady in Indiana that I believe her brother is an agent, Howard. It's Abby
Yes.
Burlacher.
Actually, brother and father.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
So Abby does a ton of our sampling work in Indiana, all of it in Indiana, and she's fantastic. Does a great job. So we have a local person there that gets right out and does it from that standpoint. And yeah, that's the end of the day. You're going to get a report, all the data. And your CPA, if he has a question, is going to call our CPA for guidance or help or any questions they may have. And I should say, we have done work now, Howard, you're probably familiar with Clifton Larston Allen out of Minnesota. They're one of the largest ag accountants. Sure. We've had so many people be like, God, is this thing legit? What is it, a scheme, whatever? We've got CLA that has vetted us for months, and now they refer us to clients, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, a lot of large groups that have gone through this and really have, of course, validated the approach to it. So for some people, while it feels a little bit odd, I guess would be the word, because they haven't heard about it, it's a complete, obviously legitimate legal way to take advantage of this.
Well, I think that's my goal, was to basically expose our landowners and potential landowners to this concept, because as they acquire farms, as they think about factoring into a return calculation, what my farm can actually generate for me, this is a tool that can be used. The other thing that it is going to lower your basis. But if you are of a mindset that you don't intend to sell that farm, which a lot of farmers don't, right, Tyler? It's always going to be in the family. Well, then that resale and that basis reduction is kind of immaterial at that point. But I want to make the point, or reemphasize the point you made. Capital gains taxes in Indiana, that's going to be all in 25%. Other states have different state tax levels for capital gains. I get that. But in Indiana, it's all in 25%. Odds are that's lower than a lot of the income tax rates. So you're still money ahead, taking the deduction, taking the and putting that money in your pocket today. And then when you do sell the farm, eventually you're going to pay a lower capital gains tax anyway.
That's right. Exactly right. Yeah.
Owen or Joe, did we have any other questions that people sent in?
I have not seen any, no.
No, I don't see any either.
Anything else you want to add, Tyler?
No, I think that's it. I had something I wanted to add, but I forgot it. So I will maybe think about it when I listen to your report and but no, at the end of the day, you covered it, Howard. It's the one thing I was going to add that we have found is when you're going to look at a farm to buy, or a client's looking at a farm to buy, or a farmer, my wife and I bought a farm here last year and I wanted to stop bidding, but I knew that there was a mountain of fertility in that ground that I was going to get to take as a tax deduction. And I bid 3 more times than I got it. And it was a cattle, these guys had a feedlot and they put cattle manure on it forever.
Oh, yeah.
And it came out to $3,100 an acre was the value on it.
Wow.
So the farm, which I stopped bidding at 10.5, it went for 11. And I took a $3,200 at, a 30% tax bracket. It lowered my purchase price by $1,000 an acre.
Wow.
By knowing that this existed, I was like, shit, we have to keep pushing it, because look at the value there. So what I tell a lot of folks that are looking at ground, if you have this in your back pocket, you can afford to bid an extra couple of times to get it, because it's probably going to come back to you, in the form of the tax savings.
And we did have a question come in. What's your contact information? And Tyler will get that out to everybody. So
Okay.
Everybody on the call, we'll make sure you've got Tyler's phone number, email, and how to get a hold of him. I appreciate your comments on the weather out in Nebraska. That will make those of us in Indiana who are experiencing what they call a flash drought. Up until about May, 20th, we couldn't, in some places, even plant. It was too wet. And then it hasn't rained since. And so we have some fields that are struggling a little bit getting started just because it's so dry, but certainly nothing like what you're experiencing out west.
Yeah, it's been, York County, Nebraska, and Hamilton County, Nebraska, Central Nebraska, all irrigated, are the 2 largest producing counties in the state. York County, Nebraska is the largest seed corn production county in the United States. There's about 80 or 90,000 female acres of seed corn grown here. All the 4 bigs are here. It's considered a garden county of the U.S., one of the 7. DeKalb County, Illinois is one, et cetera. And man, it is as dry. We had typically May is the wettest month for us, and May was the driest it's been since 1857. So we caught 0 rain in May. We've caught 0 so far in June. And if typically we don't get it in May and June, we never get it in July and August. So we are in a drought period. We're irrigating as hard as you possibly can irrigate to keep things moving, and it's a challenge. But things can change really quick. We could get a 5-incher tomorrow. So
Tyler, we had a question. Can you take the deduction if you cash rent the farm?
Yeah, so. The law says that the deduction is available to someone, to a person engaged in the business of farming or engaged in the business of agriculture. Now, we have CPAs, we've worked with them all, and most of their take is if you're engaged, you're concerned about the property upkeep, who the farmer is, you live nearby or you see the property, and the revenue from the farm is part of your income that sustains you. You're engaged in the business of agriculture, whether you like it, whether you want to believe it or not, as being the farmer or not. Where they would say that somebody is not engaged in the business of farming is if you live in California and inherited a farm from grandma and grandpa, and for example, Howard, your firm does 100% of everything and sends them a check at the end of the year, they're not really in-depthly involved. But we have a lot of clients that say, CPAs that will say, even in that scenario, if I own the asset, because this does apply for someone that does inherit farmland, you don't just have to purchase it. If I own the asset, it's no different than owning a house or a rental house. It's my asset and I can take whatever advantages to it. So we have a massive amount, I would say 60% of our clients are people that cash rent their land out. So yes, that would apply. I think there was one more question about
difference in values of a 100-year-old farm versus a new purchase. I assume, Tyler, where we're going there is that really this only can apply to the last 3 years, right? By statute?
Yeah, yeah, by statute, last 3 years. Now, if that farm was 100 years old and it was inherited today, obviously, that works. But yeah, it's 3 years is our statute limitations. You can go back.
So if in fact it transferred because it was one generation to the next generation, could that next owner take a deduction at that point in time?
Yeah, every time there's a change in basis,
Okay,
change in basis or change in legal ownership. So EIN or obviously LLC, whatever. So yeah, anytime there's a change, then you can take it again.
great. All right, well, Tyler, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time today and explaining this concept to us. And Halderman utilizes a lot of cash flex leases. So to kind of ease your mind in the, are you in the business of farming? Cash flex lease has a base guaranteed rent, but it also has a bonus based upon the revenue of the farm, which engages you actively in the farm.
Absolutely.
To enough of a degree to qualify for this. I don't know that. I don't want to.
No, I would, yeah. 99.99% of everyone qualifies because they are one way, shape, form, or another engaged. So, but yeah, if you pass around our contact information for the folks on the call, if you have questions, information, email, call, Nolan, I'll make sure you have everything here in a second. And Howard, I'm going to go on mute and learn about what's going to go on here.
Okay, I appreciate it. And we will move on to my segment. This is going to be somewhat abbreviated from in the past because I don't want to be redundant. Joe, please confirm for me, you're seeing the presentation?
Yep, good to go.
All right. So, sometimes when I do this, it can be upwards of 60, 70 slides. I'm not going to do that today. The farm real estate market, as you might imagine, this time of year is not what I would call a hot sales season. Now, when I let off today, I did talk about the fact that we had 4 auctions this week. Honestly, folks, we're going to go into a pretty slow season over the balance of June and July because it's just not a typical time of year to sell a lot of farms. But I do see those auctions being scheduled as we go forward into the fall, and we do have a few nice size opportunities coming up. So if you're interested in buying land, there will be opportunities ahead. So where are we today? I want to start out with showing you the Federal Reserve Bank report. This came out in April, and all this does is just kind of confirms what we've experienced. I don't know why, Tyler, they've got Indiana leading the way. You would argue that I was always better, right? That's where you grew up. But this does show that the percent change from April to April was up 10% for the whole 7th district. I don't know that we quite saw that much appreciation as Indiana's showing. I think this is really a catch up, in my opinion, to the overall 40% increase that we've experienced. My next slide is really the Purdue chart. And you'd say, well, why are you showing this, Howard? It's a year old, and it is. I just want to show you that this is where the market has been. What you want to watch for, the Purdue survey is being done right now. So Todd Keithy at Purdue University sent out the survey a week ago. I've responded to it. A lot of our folks are responding to it. That'll be published in early August. So you might just watch for that coming out in August and you'll see the update. I would anticipate you're still going to see another step up because again, this is a June to June type of survey. Here's the trend. Many of you that have joined us in the past have seen this 2021 WAPI chart. And again, just as a review, because I know there's new folks on here, when we sell a farm, we document the sales price per cropland acre. Karst does these for 80% cropland farms or more. And basically, we divide the sale price by the productivity index of the soils that exist on that. And that varies by state, how they do it. But within a given state, like Indiana, all the farms are compared to one another based upon the various soils that exist on that property. So you might have a WAPI, a weighted average productivity index. The farm we sold yesterday had 121 bushels to the acre. You could have one as high as 180. You could have one as low as below 100. But basically, we take that sale price. So in yesterday's case, $7,700 an acre divided by 121 bushels per acre of productivity index, and you end up at $62 per corn bushel of productivity index. So all that does really is give us trends. Where's the market moving? I went back and still show this 21 chart because it shows the big move that I was just addressing. And so we were trading for 5-6 years in that $50, $55 per WAPI number. We jumped to 80 back in 2021. That was a 40% increase that we documented. So as we went through all of 22, we stayed, the red trend line stayed in that $85, $90. I think we averaged all of 22 at $85 per corn bushel of productivity index. One thing I want to point out is farms are all different. So to say that $85 is the right number to use for your farm would be an error, because you look at all these different points and some of them are above and half are above and half are below. That's what makes the trend line. And so there's a lot of variability in every farm, and I just want to point that out to folks. That's why you want a professional to take a look at your property, is to really figure out where you are on this scale. Are you above 100 or are you below 100? Here's 2023. And this isn't, I don't know that this encapsulates to the last couple of sales this week, but I looked at them. They're right in line with where this trend is moving. So we're still seeing the market stay strong and moving maybe a little bit stronger here in 2023. And that was evidenced by the results in the auctions this week. So here's the long-term chart, and you kind of see that long 5 or 6 year trend there where we stayed in the 50s, then we jumped to the 80s, and now we're trending up toward the 90 on average. So the farmland market is certainly performing well. One of the things that we've done since the April seminar was, well, does quality matter? So as the farm is a better soil farm, does the price go up based upon the productivity index? So Pat did this analysis. And so it's a different chart in the sense that on the bottom, your lower productivity farms are on the far left and your better farms are on the far right. And these are actual Halderman sales. So there's no question what they brought. They're 80% cropland or more. And if you look at that, yes, quality matters. Better farms sell for a higher price per bushel of productivity index. I think that's intuitive, at least it was to me, that usually you would think that a better quality asset is going to bring more value than what a poor quality. Not as much of a change, though, maybe, as what one might expect. It isn't as dramatic. So then the other thing that we did since the last seminar was to look at size. Because many times you've heard people say, well, 40 acres is always going to bring more than a 600-acre farm. And yes, it does. Size does matter to some degree. But again, maybe not as significantly as what you and I might initially think. And so small is on the far left. Bigger farms are on the far right, and you can see certainly the trend is a little bit down. So size does impact value when we look over a long, in this case, about a 2.5 year time period. So I thought that was helpful to know. It kind of confirms what we would believe. It doesn't really argue with any of that. It's kind of in alignment with it. So I want to highlight this. I think I brought it up back in April, but location, location, location. That's the value of real estate. And I just want to highlight this again. Back in November, on the same day, we had 2 different farms sell, one in Cass County, north central Indiana, one in Delaware County, east central Indiana. Very similar productivity indexes and a almost 100% different price. So location matters, reputation matters. And so those are things that are really somewhat a little harder to quantify until you know the marketplace that your property sits in. And then I want to just wrap up a little discussion of our sales with this, and this is just the sales since May 4th that we've conducted. You can kind of see all over the board, right? We have a couple of them, one in Rush County at 158 per WAPI, or 158 WAPI, it brings $82. You got 160 WAPI. So those are 2 farms, the Rush County and the Wabash County, better than average farms. And they brought that 82 to 90. So right at or a little bit below maybe the trend line. Although I looked at this Wabash County one, folks, that's where I live. This farm's 5 miles from me. So I know this market reasonably well. There was a 30 acres to the west of this that sold in the last 6 months. for $13,000 an acre. So I think this one still sold pretty well at the $90 per WAPI point. Then Dave and Michael had a sale down in Bartholomew County earlier this week. It brings 172 per WAPI point. That is a sandy soil. If you look at the WAPI, it's 106. That's way below average, except in that area. And kind of like Tyler was talking about irrigation, this is a perfect location and there's a ton of irrigation. So the question is, on these two pieces, can you come in and irrigate them? They weren't set up really conducively for a big center pivot by any means. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes, but I think that irrigation potential factored into this price. And then you can see a couple of what I would call below average farms in Newton and White County the last 2 days, again in Indiana, and the Newton and Iroquois County, Illinois was on the border. And they're a little bit below average, and they brought a little bit below average pricing as a result, which is something we kind of anticipated. Although I would tell you, in both of these sales, they were well above the expected release price going into the sale. So our team was extremely pleased with this pricing. Here are our buyers, and I just show this to look at the 23 graph, or part of this graph, 65% farmer buyers today. That stands to reason, folks, because last year was the best farm income year since 1973, inflation adjusted. So who might be the dominant purchaser? It would be those folks that are directly benefiting from those higher farm incomes. But now we're going to transition a little bit into talking about where we stand more so today. And this is the Purdue Ag Barometer. I show this every time we do this. And the report just came out a couple of days ago at 104. That is as low as it was back, if you go back to where we were at the COVID time period, and then where we were a year ago in May. So that's not a real bullish factor. Why? Interest rates, concern about inflation, higher input prices, but also the correction we've experienced in commodities. And so if you've missed that, corn and soybean prices are off quite substantially from where they were back at the first of the year and last year, and getting down to the point where closer to break even being $5 per bushel corn and 12 something or so soybeans. And so as those numbers get closer to that, I think you're seeing with the higher interest rates, some degree of concern out there in the ag marketplace. This chart just documents that we are at the all-time high of farmland values, even if we adjust for inflation. And that's where this lower line on the chart is that you're at the all-time high. So I pointed out to a potential client or yesterday, if you're into the sell high moment, this would be your sell high moment because you're at the all-time high. Farmland debt, just a couple different charts on this. You get curious about who holds the debt. So the blue bars on this chart are the total number of farms. And I think most people know that most of the farms in the United States are honestly hobby farms. They're under $100,000 of income a year. But the debt is carried by the much larger farm operations, and those are on the far right in this, and that's the orange line. Again, not necessarily surprised, but the farms that gross over $1 million in revenue are carrying most of almost 50% of the debt that exists out there. That makes sense to me. Here's the interest rates. I updated this chart, and you can see how they've jumped up where you're in that 7 to 8% range for real estate intermediate term debt. So certainly they're much higher than what they were 2 years ago, but historically speaking, kind of right in the middle of the range. So I think this chart is kind of helpful from a perspective standpoint. If you've been in ag for the last 10 years, you would say, well, gosh, these interest rates are high. But if you were in ag prior to 2008, they're not necessarily so high. Another way to think about the impact of interest rates, though, is this chart. And I thought this was really helpful to compare and contrast back to 1980. And we always reference the 1980s because of the big downturn in farmland values that we experienced then. Interest rates were double digits. And you can see here in 1983, it was 35 cents of every dollar earned went to pay interest. Today, that's 12 cents. It's up, but it's 12 cents. And it probably is a little higher than that, although interest rates have kind of moderated here the last few months. But that gives you a nice perspective. It's about 1/3 of what it was back in the 1980s. So where do land values go from here? And as I've always said, it's farm income, interest rates, and supply. Incomes, we want to hit this real quick. You'd say, Howard, you just said last year was the best year since 1973. That's the second to the last point. The far right point here is what their prediction is for 2023. So I want to make that real clear. But notice, even though it's a big downturn from last year's high, it's still above the 2002 to 2021 averages. So while going down, trending downward, it's still above where we were on the averages. So I think that's going to be supportive of farmland values from an income standpoint. Here, if you adjust for real net farm income, adjusted for inflation, you can see this is where you go back to that 1973 comment of mine. 2022 is the second to last point on the right, and you go all the way back. 73 is a better year, and then you're going back into the World War II era. So those of you that were around in 1973, you might remember the big wheat buy that Russia made back at that time and really drove prices up and therefore incomes. Farm incomes, I've said this in other presentations, and I thought this chart really documents it well. We are at a new plateau in farm incomes. And so when we think about farm incomes and what you read from USDA in terms of projections, I think this is a helpful chart to keep in the back of your mind. From 1973 to 2006, $85 billion in net farm income was a good number. You were above that, it was a good year. Below that, not so much. Now we've moved to where 115 billion is more of that benchmark, I would argue. Cap rate. I only throw this chart out here. Again, this is a year old, but this is important because we start to see some folks making decisions based on interest rates. And we had, going back to, the last 12 months probably, CD rates in that 4 to 5% range. We've had some 1031 exchange clients say, you know what? I'm not going to do the exchange. I'm going to pay the tax and invest in 5% CDs because that will cash flow me more dollars than if I invest and buy a farm at a 2% cap rate. I did the math. That is true. If you take 100 cents of every dollar and do an exchange with it, and you buy a farm that generates a 2% cap rate, you will actually generate more total dollars in cash flow if you take 75 cents of those dollars, paying 25% capital gains taxes, invest 75 cents at a 5% rate on CDs. Again, you don't have the appreciation that you have in farmland when you buy a CD. So I don't want to compare them apples to apples, but that is a factor to certain investors when you look at investing in farmland. So farmland leases, this is a survey we did back in March. I think I talked about this in April, but basically our results from 2023 cash rents were higher, steady to higher. There is increasing demand for farmland to rent. Again, this should be fairly intuitive. You're coming off the best farm income year ever. You should see cash rents and pressure upwards on cash rents. So not a surprise in this data. There was less available and there was more demand. And then as we talk about our cash flex leases, I mentioned this in Tyler's presentation, we utilize a lot of these. Base gross revenues up this year for corn and soybeans because costs are up, fertilizer, seed, etc. And base cash rents moved up a little bit as well. Here's the Purdue survey of cash rent chart. I think when you see the results from the June survey this year, you will probably see cash rents move up at a higher rate than what land values did from 22 to 23. Just my prediction. So where do we go this year, and wrap this up fairly quickly? A lot of this information that we've talked about before. Interest rates, look at the difference. 2 years ago, we were at 2.77% on 15-year fixed money for a real estate mortgage. Now we're at 6.8%. So not triple, but certainly more, 2.5 times what it was back then. Keep in mind, though, this first point on the screen. We've seen commodity prices jump back up, a little bit the last week or two. Tyler just talked to you about the dry weather being experienced in the Western Corn Belt. We've certainly been dry in the Eastern Corn Belt. The just-in-time delivery, the fact that we don't have a buffer of grain out here in the world, this is a weather market being traded over the next 2 months. And so it's going to be something to watch every day. If you're in the market to sell corn or soybeans, you guys know that. But that will be a big impact on where we see farmland values when we come into the fall. If we're looking at 450 corn because it starts raining everywhere and we produce a huge crop, that's going to be probably a little bit of a bear from farmland value standpoint. But if things remain dry as they are today, I want to point that out today, then certainly you might see 550 corn or more, and that's going to be profitable, and therefore farmland values will continue to rise or trend upward in my opinion. Government support is going to be low. Input costs actually have come down, especially fertilizer. They've actually come off their high. So break evens should trend downward a little bit as we look to the balance of 23 and into 24. So we're still seeing cropland values steady to up. That was the prediction that we had back in the winter. Probably maybe a little more steady than I am up today, but that can all change with the weather over the next 2 to 3 weeks or a couple of months. Still seeing strength though in timber, recreational, rural residential land and homes. It's just been surprising to me that demand continues. And maybe it shouldn't be surprising because unemployment has remained very low. I'm starting to see a few more notices come through the Indiana Chamber of this business closing and laying off workers. So maybe we're getting into a little more of a recession time period. That bears watching. But again, as we speak today, demand for that recreational land, residential land, or properties continues to be pretty strong. And you might notice the 2 farms that we sold the last 2 days would be those average to below average farms, a little more of a hassle farm. And they were good sales. I don't want to misrepresent it. Those were good, successful auctions, lots of bidding on them. But the price per acre was at $7,700, $8,700 an acre, quite a bit less than what our really good farmland in Indiana is selling for today. And then here was the survey results, expectations from March through September. And again, steady with a slight trend upward was kind of the theme. And maybe we were a little more bearish back in March when the survey was done about rural residential and recreational land. I think what we've seen is interest rates kind of flattening out. We haven't experienced a full-fledged depression yet, at least by Howard's observations. And so as a result, I think those are hanging in there pretty steady today. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and we are, what, at 1:09. I think that's pretty good for having 3 speakers today. We try to keep this to an hour, as you might recall. And if you want this, we recorded it. Mason gave his approval. I'm sure, Tyler, you're fine with sending out a recorded version of this. And so if you would like a copy of it, you've got my email on here. You can send an email to me or to Nolan and say, hey, send me a recording of this. I'd like to hear the seminar again. We'd be happy to do that. If you have questions as you get into, what's the right rent for 2024? What should my farm bring if you're thinking about selling it, or if you're starting to think about estate planning, because just a reminder, the estate tax exemption expires at the end of 25. We're a couple years from that. So planning in advance would be something I would highly recommend. So if you need a valuation for that, or you're contemplating maybe buying or selling, that's what we're here for. We're here to help people determine right rent, right price, and just help you with your farmland investment. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Nolan, did we have additional questions?
Yeah, we've got one here. It says, assuming 8% inflation, 4% CD rate, how does farmland compare when it earns 2% cash return plus inflation?
And I'm glad somebody made that point, because Howard failed to do that, right? I forgot to mention when I was giving my interest rate comparison, that is the thing that you miss. You're exactly right. If 8% inflation and you have 5% CDs, your dollar is still worth less a year from now. Farmland does perform. It's a very positively correlated asset to inflation. And so it's really shouldn't be a surprise that we've experienced a lot of uptick in farmland. It's been up 20% in Indiana, so the Fed says, this past year. So if you get a 2% cash return and you add on top of that a 20% appreciation, you're outpacing inflation by a multiple. And so I think that's why folks should have a diverse portfolio of assets. And on the U.S. agriculture side, which is an asset management company that we have some ownership in, they build farmland portfolios for large institutional clients. Institutional clients being pension funds and endowments. And those folks are interested in investing in farmland today as an asset diversifier. And they want that inflation hedge that farmland offers. So I'm glad that point was brought up.
Good deal. I think that's the only question I saw here.
Okay. Joe, do you see any others?
Nope, we look good.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you enjoyed a little different take with Mason Gillis to kick us off. A reminder, you've got the fertility depreciation tax strategy. If you want to reach out to Tyler about that, you can you'll get the contact information, and we stand ready to help you with your farmland investment. So hope everybody has a great weekend, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Howard.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.